Back live with you tonight on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Now, there's been some consternation, shall I say, after a Russian cargo ship docked at Simonstown Naval Base in Cape Town. The vessel has allegedly switched off its tracking and identification and other information. Critics have observed that the ship could have docked at the harbour like all others instead of berthing at a national key point. The Defence Ministry has not issued any statement yet on the matter. Joining us now to explain why the ship's presence may be unwelcomed is DA Shadow Minister of Defence and Military Affairs, Kobus Marais. Kobus, good evening and thank you very much for your time. You're one of those who've been very critical of the arrival of this ship. In fact, the arrival of this cargo ship in our home port of the South African Navy fleet should certainly be a concern. How does a ship, whether believed to be in distress or not, make its way to such a critical point in terms of our maritime defense?
Good evening to your listeners. Yes, it is most certainly a concern. One must just take a step back and see on the tracker, marine tracker, where is this vessel coming from? So it is not coming from, say, from Australia or from the Antarctic. It is actually came down the Atlantic coast, and the transponder of the AIS was obviously switched off. And it seems like around St. Helena Bay, that area, it was switched on. It sailed past Cape Town, and then it was on the Agulhas Bank, what they call, for about 3 days while the transponder was on, and then suddenly it was switched off, and the next moment we saw it in Simonstown Harbour, the naval base. So there's a lot of questions. If it was in fact a vessel in distress, why Simonstown? And if it was in distress, normally a commercial vessel is then towed back to Table Bay Harbour. So there's quite a lot of questions that has arose from this. Obviously, we were made aware of this on Tuesday night because on Wednesday morning it was reported that there was quite a lot of activity going on during the night on the harbour. Yesterday it was very quiet on Wednesday morning. Wednesday evening late and during the night it was again very, very busy. And during the days, the trucks with the containers on is actually parked outside on the sports ground and is heavily guarded. So quite clear something is happening, and we're not quite sure what is going on. And no information has been passed on except for late this afternoon that they will issue a statement tomorrow, only tomorrow, which obviously is quite late in terms of perceptions.
Yeah.
And then, the fear amongst us and also the discussions that is going on internationally, diplomatically, in the security sector.
Yeah.
And that can obviously damage not only the defense force further, but clearly, the image of South Africa.
So let's talk about that particular perception, which is rather important. I know we've got a new Navy chief who has come in trying to get things back into order, saying, of course, the lack of infrastructure and resources is a big challenge, but we are trying to make things work. Much to the concerns that have been raised already that our maritime defense is not at its best right now. The landing of this ship in such a manner, could it be a reflection of the shortfalls that we are having in our maritime defense, or is this a deliberate thing? I mean, wherever this vessel is coming from, it was heading for Simonstown, and those who are in authority know that it was heading there.
Well, I'm quite clear, from the evidence that I've collected during the past 2 days, it is quite evident that part of the destination is Simonstown. The eventual destination is apparently Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. It started off in Cameroon, so that's the information that I could collect it. And quite clearly, there was a purpose to take it to Simonstown, because, Simonstown, one must remember, is a national strategic key point. So you don't find a commercial vessel just whether in distress or not, sailing into the harbour and then offloading your cargo. That doesn't happen, not in any way. It might be towed into False Bay, yes, and lay on anchor in False Bay, and then, there will be companies that will be appointed to assist the vessel and then tow it to wherever, they need to repair it. That doesn't seem to be the facts. So yes, the Navy, the new chief, I've met him. He's a very impressive guy, and I wish him well. Unfortunately, he has inherited a broken system and a broken Navy, and he has got very little, if any, resources to his avail, and to actually do anything, on the maritime side. So yes, there are indications, and we're working hard in Parliament to make sure that Treasury appropriates funds to the National Navy for the upgrading and the maintenance of the frigates and the submarines, to bring that back into service, and then obviously to procure additional inshore and outshore patrol vessels. But that will probably take, if they start appropriating money over the medium term, that will probably take another 18 to 24 months before we can see some of those frigates and submarines being reintroduced into service. So yes, he's got a major challenge, and he hasn't got much resources. So if anything like this is happening, you will probably rely on private sector tugboats to assist such a vessel. And then unlikely into Simonstown Naval Base.
So some South African Navy officers or former Navy officers who have been watching this particular vessel are reporting that she is riding quite high, which means whatever load she is carrying is quite light. It's quite a light cargo. Now, in your experience, what do you think could be possibly contained in vessels that behave this way?
One don't want to speculate too much. We know that this specific vessel, she can carry containers on her deck as well. And clearly from the pictures that we have seen, there's no containers on her deck. So it means that it was relatively light because it was only, below the deck that there was cargo. Whether it was fully loaded, that is obviously also a question. And with the greatest of respect, that maybe brings more questions. So who would ever, lease a vessel like this for basically nothing in it and still make money? Because as far as I can collect information, this is a commercial vessel. So commercial vessel wants to make money. And yes, if you only want to put one crate of bananas in it and hire the whole ship, no problem. If you pay for it, no problem. So what is the weight of the cargo is not so much the concern and the problem, but what is inside that. One must remember that any munitions that is exported out of South Africa or imported into South Africa, whether it is for exhibition purposes, whether it's for exercises, whether it's for transportation in conveyance to another country, must apply to the NACC for a permit to bring in those munitions. And obviously it goes through a vigorous process, that must approve that importation of such munition cargo. I know for a fact that on the third quarter's report of the NCACC, there was nothing that was reported in terms of applications of imports from Russia or export to Russia. So if that is not the case, then what is on board the vessel? Yeah. Because the evidence and the prima facie evidence is clearly that there was a hell of a lot of activity going on with the crane of the ship that was actually unloading pallets that was loaded into containers on trucks.
Yeah.
So where that was transported to is a very good question. Whether it has got something to do with the arms dockyard facility in Simonstown is another question. So one doesn't want to speculate too much because, I'm not one of those fear mongers that will call out, all these ridiculous stuff. But there are concerns, and it certainly impacts on our integrity in South Africa internationally, and certainly our foreign policy.
Absolutely, precisely, especially in a country where we are currently, and we don't want to speculate again, dealing with the Pala matter where others are saying there was money that came into the country in all forms of ways that are not supposed to have followed that route. So, I mean, it could, in some instances, spark that kind of debate to say, well, this could be another situation where sums of US dollars or whatever could be coming into the country. Is there a way, I mean, what are you expecting in that letter of response from the minister? Is there a way of knowing what was there and it would be declared and so on and so forth? Is that the kind of answer that you would like to get?
Well, obviously, if it is a legal transaction, then there must be import documentation. Whether it's arms corps importations or any other company or any other institution, there must be documentation. So obviously, similar, you will remember what the whole process we went through with the Cuban medicine and also getting access to documentations, which is actually then exposed all the wrongdoings. Similar will be done here, and we will not rest until we get to the documentation to see what has been brought in. My purpose is not that, irrespective of what the information is, to go out and blow it out when it is not in the best interest and security and integrity interest of South Africa. If there are wrongdoings, we will chase them as hard as possible. If there are legitimate answers that this is really sensitive information and that cannot be, disclosed to the public, I will respect that because we are consistently exposed to sensitive and high sensitive information, that we know how to deal with that. But if it is something that is illegal and a process of discrediting South Africa further, be sure that there will be no stone unturned. We will get to the bottom of that, and if I need to go and go to the National Prosecuting Authority again and open criminal charges, we'll gladly do that.
And finally, the one other thing is that some are pointing to this vessel as being sanctioned by the U.S. following the Russia attack on the Ukraine. How significant is that as far as the South African context is concerned?
Well, in terms of officially from the government side, there's no problem. I mean, there's no sanction from their side. So in other words, they will probably gladly accept such a vessel. You recall the whole saga about that super yacht Nord that came from Hong Kong and was en route to Cape Town. And even at that stage, irrespective of the waves that we have made in the DA and the Western Cape Premier and Cape Town Mayor, the government has said, that vessel is free to come to Cape Town and basically hide here. So, and that has damaged South Africa, and eventually there was enough pressure, so it ended up in the Maldives. Similarly with this vessel, if it is a sanctioned vessel and it had to, go through all the legal protocols, it might have caused the same kind of problems, or, they are just hiding that for as long as the vessel is still in the harbour. If that vessel leaves tonight or tomorrow, and they issue a statement tomorrow, then whatever anybody is doing, the vessel is gone. So nobody can attach the vessels, nobody can even try to do that. Then it is too late, but the damage is done. The perception that is left by this narrative that we are open for criminal business worldwide is certainly not helping us, and especially for grey listing coming up, and our trade negotiations and trade relationships with the West and with the European Union and America, it's certainly not helping us in that regard. And really, one must just remember, in terms of munitions, there is what they call a NATO standard and more a East Bloc standard. So the normal ammunitions manufactured in South Africa is according to NATO standards. So they don't necessarily fit the armament of the Russian, and even Chinese. So that's why you will find very few really contracts between Russia and South Africa, purely because of this vast difference in standards. So that might not be the issue. So then, the question comes, so what is in the vessel? Be honest with us. Tell us what it is. And then we will not, pest you so much.
Kobus, we hope we'll get answers to those questions. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us today. That is Kobus Marais. He is the Dear Shadow Minister for the Defense and Military Veterans.